Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Reverse Sweep. We're back this week and every week moving forward. This is going to be our lineup for the qualifiers. And then we're going to have Censor back on for the majors. Unfortunately, Enable is not going to be joining us on the Reverse Sweep this year, but that does leave an opportunity to maybe have some special guests. And so, first of all, let us know in the comments below who you might want to see on for those big major weeks. A little introduction. My name is James. I'm a producer here at Deserto. I'm basically here to play a host role and make sure that these two lovely gentlemen don't fight over who's a bigger OpTic fan. And we're gonna have a good qualifying episodes. And gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good. Don't sell yourself short though, James. You were with us all year last year.
I was
behind the scenes, behind the camera, helping us out. So it's good to now have a face to the man behind in the chat. So yeah, I think we're gonna have a good time. I think we got a great lineup, and yeah, I think we're gonna kill it as always. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, man. I mean, same here. I'm excited to be back. I know that me and Pat are a part of the flank, but here we have a different way of discussing stuff a little bit more. We get to go a little bit more in depth to some things that we might not have time to talk about on the flank. So yeah, man, I'm just excited to get to the show.
Yeah, beautiful. And it's going to be a lot more community driven show this year. So we really want you guys to comment and get involved. And I'm going to be going through all the comments and kind of bringing your questions and concerns to these two so we can really dive into certain topics. But let's address the elephant in the room. It's been a crazy week in the CDL, and a lot of it has been around this whole OpTic, Dashy, Pred, Arcities, mumbo jumbo. How do we want to start into this? It's a lot to dive into.
Well, I'll start actually because I think there was a flank episode that I didn't get to participate in because I had some moving to do where they obviously discussed some of the Dashy stuff that recently came up. So for those of you guys that might be living under a rock, Dashy came onto Twitch and just started going rogue. He was talking about all the struggles of the OpTic team, what led him to getting dropped, his disagreements with Rambo and all that stuff. And dude, I was honestly so entertained. It was like 1 a.m. I was like Dashy going live, and I was just like, oh, I'm just sitting there with my phone out, just giggling the entire time. Pat, I didn't get to hear your thoughts on the situation, but like, just spitball here.
I mean, okay, so there's two things, right? This isn't the first time he's been dropped, right? This is technically like the second time in reality. So I think there was some a little bad blood that was boiling, right? No matter what, when you get dropped, like, you're always going to feel some type of way. Yes, this is a business. That's kind of how we're looking at it. But still, I mean, when your teammates are kind of going behind your back, which is kind of the way that Dashy explained this roster going downhill, right? That he could tell that the team was distancing from inside, and they weren't as close as they used to be. And that's always a major key factor in like realizing that your team is not what it was before. And then kind of, yeah, he did go rogue and went into the specifics of kind of the issues with the coaching staff that he felt. And we also saw Damon. I don't know if you saw that, Chris. Damon had also went on. He was quoted on Reddit a few times of saying something of like how Ray doesn't necessarily get along with the players or whatever the case may be. Dashy had went into detail about Ray maybe missing practices or something. Just random examples that you could tell there was some bad blood.
Bowling
internally.
memes, the bowling memes.
Yeah, the Rambo, not Rambo Ray. But yeah, also I was just gonna say, I mean, it's a weird situation too, because like Dashy is probably one of the most talented players in the CDL. And so to me, this wasn't a skill thing whatsoever. I think it was very clearly just a team chemistry issue that was not going to get resolved unless a change was made.
Yeah, I think Brandon kind of like he was going in depth into like why he didn't like Rambo's coaching style, and I think this is why one of the big reasons why he was dropped, right? I think Scump and Shotzzy and all those guys obviously all side with Rambo. We haven't heard them say anything bad about the guy, and he's still their coach, so obviously they see the value in him, and I think rightfully so. Rambo is he was a very talented player, very smart player, one of the pioneers, very accoladed champion, right? And I think he definitely has a good head on his shoulders when it comes to like coaching and stuff like that. And I think he does bring a lot of assets to the team. But the one things that kind of were like red flags to me, that at least from Dashy's side of the story, that was irritated me was how one he would skip practice at times, being the main coach, and obviously the way that he would record the mini map. So he had this thing where he would only record mini map in their VOD sessions, and so when they would go and watch VOD, they would just see map. They wouldn't actually see gameplay. They wouldn't see like the the little things like right. You can't see this guy got caught reloading or this guy was throwing a nade or I got stuck. Right, you're just kind of seeing where spawns are, and I do see the problem in that because personally, as someone who coached a little bit in challengers, right, capturing gameplay and stuff like that gives you a more full picture. So I'm on Dashy's side here in terms of that. I don't like that sort of approach, but also he kept making it seem like Ray was trying to take credit for some of the OpTic players' success and when they were playing well, and I don't think Ray's that type of person. So personally, for me, it kind of just felt like Brandon had this built up animosity that almost like clouded his judgment and kind of just made it seem like it was them against him, and he was definitely throwing some personal shots there to
Animosity
Rambo.
is a good word. I think it was just that whole situation was just full of animosity across the board.
I think it's why the CDL is so interesting because like in regular sports you don't get like scenarios like this. Like you don't get someone that like gets dropped from like an NBA team and then goes on Instagram live and is like just airing out all the problems of like the team. Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know.
Call of Duty is a very unique esport in that asset. I think the players are very connected with social media, and I don't know if it's because the players are young. I know some of the we're getting older. Players are getting older, and the average age is rising in terms of the pro league. But bro, you think that some of these people people are just so immature and they just let it all out, dude, on socials.
It's also a respect issue, right? Like I think there's a big difference between the problem with the CDL is like some of the coaches in the CDL are players that the players were playing against like a couple years ago and were shitting on and made them retire. And now they're the coach and they're dictating roster moves. I think that was a big issue that Krim had when I spoke to Krim about like just his opinion on the CDL. Like he's being denied roster spots by people he felt he was just like world starring his whole career. Which is a much different dynamic in real sports. And in Rambo's situation, Rambo is not only the coach, he's also the general manager of the OpTic team. So it's like there's a little more there as well. And so I think that kind of gets into the conversation of like, well, how good are not good, how useful are coaches, right? Like the big thing is like there's a clip of Formal where he was just like, I think COD coaches are completely useless, and I agree with him completely, to be honest. Just because there's a redundancy factor in what coaches are able to do, and in my opinion, it's things like what Chris said in terms of like recording VODs or recording stuff or setting up scrims or doing things that players either don't want to do or don't feel like doing. And I think that's where like the coaches come to example of what they actually do. I mean, I've been in a part of these CL teams and I know what coaches are actually doing on a day-to-day. And it's like, in terms of like something that players can't do, I just fully disagree. I think any player could do that if they really put their mind to it. And that's why you see a lot of players switch to coaching after competing, because it's something that like they know they can do. It's not something I think that there's like a big barrier to entry. And so that kind of gets into like, I don't think players respect coaches in the same way that traditional sports have. And I think that's the big issue where like players get dropped and then go rogue. Like, well, fuck this coach. Like,
I just don't think there's enough coaches. I'm not saying Rambo isn't one of them, because I think Rambo is a great coach and he has a very tenured career. I just think that they had different philosophies, and that's where that sort of animosity and stuff like that started to stem. But in general, I just don't think there's a lot of like you look at the coaches of like NFL teams or NBA teams and stuff like that, and some of those people used to play, sure, but like, dude, they have so many years, like decades of experience, right? A lot of these coaches are older men. They're not like people like, for example, like me or Ray, where like we're in like our 20s or like early 30s. Like these are like people that
and dropped.
Yeah, exactly. Like some of these people, like it's a lot more of a different environment, and I don't think there's enough good coaches in the league right now. And I'm not trying to sell myself or anything, because frankly, I could care less. I'm competing now, but I just think that as the league keeps developing and more talent starts to get pushed out, eventually we're going to have a lot more tenured players and coaches. Like for example, Pat, I think you could have been a coach if you wanted to, with all your experience and stuff like that. But there's
I got tired of dealing with some players when I was competing. I don't know if I could have done it when I was
yeah. But I mean, if you wanted to, but I mean, there are some questionable coaches in the CDL that I don't think are really contributing much outside of just like getting a player a water bottle or writing down
setting
some
up
scrim, setting up a scrim or something like that. But
agree.
yeah, I think the respect factor is definitely important. Like you said, a lot of these people don't respect the insight that some of these older players that became coaches can give because they weren't very good in the first place. I don't want to say any names, but I know there's some people out there that you probably have your head on. But
and the game changed, right? Like we kind of talked about that before, where it's like, the newer generation kids don't respect the old heads as much because the game that the old heads competed in was a much different style of Call of Duty, right? Like now we're in way more of the cracked era of Call of Duty. Maybe we're not getting as much of that in Modern Warfare as composed to the last couple of years, but we are still in that kind of like new generation of cracked players, and that's not necessarily what made some of these players who are coaches succeed in their past titles that where they found success at.
Yeah, no, most definitely.
Do you think that gets better over time? Like, as you're saying, like, do you think there is going to be a point down the road, whether it's 5-10 years, that coaches are valued and respected more? But there's also the side that, like, dude, it's like, who wants to be a coach when you see all the coaches just getting choke slammed on like social media all the time? So it's like, where does that kind of like balance out? Will we see people that are coaching that maybe didn't have a huge role in the CDL?
I think.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I think coaches have to get back to where they can calm on stage. I think really that's the big catalyst. Like if we get back to where like we say, okay, coaches are valuable, then they have to be in game, in every game mode, right? Like in all three game modes, not just respawn. I think that's where the turning point would be, where people can be like, okay, this coach is bringing a ton of value in game, because when coaches were able to do that back in the past, they did bring value. Like we had set strategies for how we used our coaches back in the day, like whether it was calling out for a particular player who was playing like a kind of a lone wolf style, who really needed to like focus on getting a blood and couldn't calm as much, or I guess we can't. I don't think we're ever gonna get back to the style where like players could like talk shit the way that like we could back in the day, but there is a lot of in-game uses that coaches just aren't able to do because of the rules that coaches can't be on the mic.
I think if coaches could be on the mic in game like they can in Halo, we would see a lot more useful coaches in the league. For example, like Pat said, people would have certain coaches doing certain roles in game, but also for players like myself, let's say I was a coach, I'm one of those players that's like very good at kind of like noticing situations and like picking up on like little tiny flaws that like my team is like having in game. And yeah, exactly. And so I can kind of like immediately correct those, like, oh, we got to rotate here, or like, yo, we got to start talking more, like something like that. Like doing those things in game would make coaches extremely valuable, because you can still do that outside of the game, but at the end of the day, the players still have to go out there and do it themselves. And some of these people, some of these players, especially the youngins, man, they get lost in the moment. And I think, I personally think that coaches should be able to talk during matches. I think I would love it. I think they would be sick.
I think it needs to be a thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
And the big thing too that like a lot of people always criticize in their communication is always small talk. Like imagine you just had a coach who could sit behind you, see all four screens, and be involved in small talk, right? Like picking up on players who aren't calming very important, crucial pieces of information just because
keeping track of names, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's tons of things that a coach could be very useful in doing in game, but just it's not a rule.
With the nature of Call of Duty and how fast paced it is, like coaching outside of the game, it's hard to have a real impact because the game is so situational based. Like at the end of the day, you can tell people how to play a generic situation, but that exact situation, for example, is never going to come up the exact same way that you kind of preached on how to play it. So it's always up to the players to use their individual Call of Duty knowledge and IQ to translate what you gave them and apply it to what they're doing now. And I think that's where a lot of players kind of struggle with. And some people coaching, dude, this is actually an interesting topic. But when I was playing with some of my amateur teammates, they had this thing where whenever you would have a bad day of scrims, they didn't like to watch VOD on the bad days. And I'll tell you why they didn't like it. And I kind of almost agree with this. is they didn't want to go back and look at these situations where they just had a bad day and overthink it, over try to correct it when it's uncharacteristic of their normal play, because then they get into a game and they start overthinking how they play certain scenarios because of they're worried about how they played it poorly before, when in reality they probably just played bad. And
Yeah,
that's the same
the right
thing.
way, just getting shit on.
That's the same thing with like coaching, right? Some people don't like being coached because when, let's say, a coach tells them you got to do this at this time, then they will only always do that all the time, when in the moment the situation calls for a different play, but they're not making that adjustment because they're so used to what their coach is telling them to do. So that's why, for example, I just sometimes the coaching play style, it also comes down to the players. But dude, if we had coaches in the actual game, I think that's where you would see like coaches be really, really useful, and people value and respect their coaches more because they're directly influencing what they're what they're doing in the game.
I feel like it would also
like
make the role more attractive, like to become a coach after being done
100%.
playing. You have more direct impact, you have more involvement, and it's directly impacting. So,
and I think players who are more qualified would get put in those roles, right? Like you wouldn't just pick up anybody. Like no offense, but and this isn't a stray. It's gonna sound like one, but like Joey Nubsy, year one, right when he got picked up by Seattle, like he didn't really have any coaching Call of Duty pro player experience. But that's because, again, like the usefulness that they had for him wasn't to be like what we're explaining here, being in game and being the impact that we were talking about. But
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was done. Yeah, I was just gonna say so it's always interesting when these coach arguments flare up. I think honestly the CDL franchises should just petition the league to get coaches back in the right role.
Yeah.
Now back to just the whole OpTic situation in general. We have like options that get laid out. Obviously, they go for Pred, it doesn't work out. They go for Arcitys, it doesn't work out. They land on Huke. And without diving into too much of the Pred and Arcitys stuff, obviously it just didn't work out. There was buyouts that didn't happen. Into OpTic's play today, we got to see Huke XEO back for the first time. What are you guys' thoughts? First opinions?
I think they looked good. I mean, I think this roster, I didn't touch on this in the flank, but I think this roster's success, at least in the respawn, it's going to come down to Huke. And the reason being is I still think Scump is going to, play just as consistent as he does, being the flex. I think iLLeY, with the pressure that Huke and Shotzzy can put on when they are playing well and that dynamic is working, it's going to make it so iLLeY can just basically sit back and pre-aim and take his time. He's not really in the mix as much anymore as he was prior in his older teams when he didn't have, let's say, a player like Huke on their roster and they had Scump on the slower SMG role. And I think at least today, Huke played really good in the respawns, and I think that's what basically helped them, take win those maps in the control and the hard point that they beat Boston on. Because I mean, I think this is a good warm-up series for them in terms of like their potential, because Vivid and Nero, they're a pretty good sub duo. They're very aggressive. So in order to beat that type of dynamic, you have to kind of match their pace and stay ahead. So I mean, I'm not going to say I'm impressed, but I'm hopeful of how this team is going to keep playing, and hopefully Huke keeps this up, because Huke was playing so poorly the last couple of years on the whole LAG thing and the LA Thieves stint, and ever since the Empire, really. So I mean, hopefully he does well.
Yeah, I mean, I they had a good win, right? But also they were playing Boston, who I think is kind of a good matchup, to be honest, for this roster, just because I think they just straight up out talent them. Like I don't know if people are going to agree with me on this, but I do think from a core level, like this OpTic roster just straight up out talents Boston. Boston would just have to fully outplay them to win. And I think we saw that through most of the respawns. Like aside from that game 4, which did get close, like I think OpTic just looked better from a slaying standpoint. And then they obviously clutched up game 5 again to a Boston team who's been really poor in game 5. I think they're like 0-4, 0-5 in game 5s this year, and they just don't have the ice. Even though in scrims, we know and we've heard Boston has just been absolutely tearing it up. Like they've been one of, if not the hardest teams to beat in scrims. But again, we look back at Raleigh. They went out last. I know Awakening got sick for one of their matches. They didn't look good there. So it's an interesting win. I think I'm still not sold just yet. I do agree with Chris, though. I think Huke is going to be a massive X factor. But I also think iLLeY is as well. I think iLLeY has to really step up here. I do think having 2 aggressive sub players is going to help him, but I do think he can't really have those like 0.8 series that he's thrown up.
Especially
in the
running
past.
an AR.
Yeah, like he is very important to this team now. Like he has to be solid, just throughout, solid, all game modes. And yeah, we saw him today. I mean, he looked great in that game 5. I think he struck the fear of God into a Boston team just with a sniper rifle.
He
So
played really good at map 1 too with AR. He was leading the slaying category.
I mean,
for
he had a
bit.
good series. He did.
Yeah.
He had a good series. Like Shotzzy, I think, had the worst series on the team. So yeah, I'm not so much sold yet, because I do think this was a last resort roster change for them. James told me they were trying to get Pred, they're trying to get RCs. Huke was a free agent the whole time. He left LAG. They parted ways, so they could have got him at any point. So it was a last resort. They had to field a roster by that Monday deadline. They just got him, and so I think it is an opportunity too for Huke to prove himself. And that's always good for a player to like be playing with something to prove, because you're probably gonna get the best out of that player. But yeah, I'm not sold just yet, and I want to see a couple more games before I give my verdict on.
We're actually going to get a nice test next week for them. They're going to play Seattle, and although Seattle hasn't looked the best, all right, they started off really slow this week. They're still playing against Pred, who I everyone knows they wanted to get, and Pred's going to come out and be like, yeah, this is why I should be on your team, and he's gonna be playing a fry, and that guy puts up unreal stats. He's one of the better SMG players in the league, if not like arguably the best SMG player in the league. So, I mean, Huke and Shotzzy both are going to have their hands full this next coming week with the Seattle match.
And now for anyone who like doesn't know, Dashy was dropped, but he's still technically their sub, correct?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
How much of this, like, do you think that that it's pretty much chalked for OpTic and Dashy, although he's in a sub spot? Or do you see any scenario where if they struggled like over the last couple weeks, there's no switching back? And where I'm going with this is like, I think there's been rumors that Dashy's, I mean, he's already probably been approached by teams. But do we not see Dashy get picked up until post Major 2? Or is there any chance that someone struggles here in the first couple weeks and they make a change to try and pick him up on the roster?
I think it'll be a post Major 2. I don't think anyone's going to make a change mid qualifier. I'd be very surprised. Also, I could imagine it's probably going to be a lengthier process to get him. It's not just going to be as simple as like we want him. Although I know Hex would probably more than accommodate him getting off the roster. Dashy, although he had his drama, like he was a part of the Green Wall for a long time, and he brought them some success, right? So, as for the Green Wall, there are people out there that still love him, and they want to see him succeed, regardless if he's on the OpTic roster or not. That probably including Hex. It's still a business, so there's still going to have to be hoops that need to get jumped through, buyouts that probably need to be met. Even if they do get a little bit lower, just to kind of get something for him and get him off the roster so he can go about his way. I don't know what the semantics of that are gonna bring, but I do see him getting picked up. I know a few teams that could probably use him. I think Rocker is one of those teams right now that has been struggling online. I wouldn't say they're going to drop attach, but I think even though Cammy is a superstar player, there could be a way where maybe they get rid of Cam, or they bench Cam, or maybe they get rid of Bance and move Cam to a sub, if that's something that's even viable. I think that's a team that could probably use his his talent. The Legion, although it'd be kind of weird to see Dashy on Vegas, who was the Paris Legion before. I think that's another question mark team. He's got a couple friends on there, and Prolude and TJ, and Clay, although he had a really, really, really good series versus Seattle this last week, there's still question marks with him, because on LAN he did have those series where he was throwing up some stinkers. So who knows if they continue to kind of like struggle, or they kind of just like stay where they're at. If they're not happy, they might make a bid for him too. So I mean, I could definitely see a couple teams that might want to make moves for Dashy.
I have a polar opposite take. I don't think he gets picked up at all this year.
Really?
I think he just commands too high of a buyout. And I don't think any team in this situation in the CDL will pay what he's worth. I don't know of his contract. If he did sign a 1+1 at the beginning of this year, I'm not 100% sure, but I think either way, I mean, unless OpTic just like gives him away for practically free, I don't see any of these teams not only giving him or paying the buyout that he's going to command, but also giving him the salary he's worth. And so I think just in this kind of situation where the CDL is at right now, we've heard of salaries coming down across a few teams. I think it's going to be tough. There's only a couple upper echelon CDL franchises And so I do think it's going to be really tough to get him off that roster.
So
Yeah, I
what you're
definitely
saying
could
is
see a world
he's going to
that happens.
Valorant is what you're saying.
Possibly for
What
the
he
next
needs
few
to do,
months.
what he,
But I think he'll get on a team in the offseason if he does become a free agent. It's just I just don't see a world he gets bought out in
Such a
this
weird
year.
off season though this year with it being the same game.
this
Like,
is a take. This is a take that I actually said on the flank, James, and Pat disagreed with me. But I think if he doesn't get on a team, he should play challengers. And I'm not saying it's because he needs to play challengers because he's a bad player. But one, we're playing a game for 2 years.
Yeah.
So him losing out on a year of the same game can potentially put other people ahead. Not saying it necessarily will, but it's a possibility. Um, Obviously, if he's out for a year, people might be less inclined to actually want to play with him because he hasn't played. So him getting reps in challengers might put him in a scenario where people are more likely to want to play with him. Secondly, the guy's a big streamer. If he turns his stream on, even for Valorant, guy gets a couple thousand viewers. You got to think if he turns his stream on to play some cups or he goes to some LAN events or scrims and stuff like that, he's gonna get a lot of viewers, and that's some good money.
Yeah.
So if he's just gonna sit on the bench, I think it's a waste. I'm not saying the guy can't sit on the bench and come back next year and still be a very talented player. I just think he's wasting his fucking time if he doesn't actually do something with the opportunity and the break that he has. I think taking a break is just dumb.
Yeah.
Coming from even me, like I'm not the same player as Dashy yet, don't get me wrong, but I took a break in Vanguard, I didn't play, and then I decided to come back and play this year. And granted, I've had some decent success.
you just
Like,
won.
I still regret it, man. Like I regret taking a break from a competitor standpoint because, bro, now I think about it, man, it's fun. It's so
Yeah.
fun to compete. I'm sure he's obviously expressed his interest in, like, he loves playing. He wants to play. I know he wants to play in the pro league, but at the end of the day, playing COD is playing COD, and I think for him to sit on the bench would be such a fucking waste, dude.
I think all that matters for him is just keeping his reputation with the pros. I think as long as he's in eights every night, which he has been, as long as he can keep that up, I think he'll be fine. I think someone posted he's on like a 9-0 8s win streak. He's just absolutely like frying. I think really that's the big thing, because come the off season, there's going to be teams that need him. There's going to be teams that want that talent. And as long as you have the players on your side, I think that's all that really matters. Like, as long as the other team's players think, okay, this guy is still that guy on the map,
Yeah.
they're going to convince their orgs to pick him up. And if he's a free agent, it's going to be much easier. Playing challengers is tough because I think he runs the risk of almost like devaluing his stock in a sense. Like, let's say he does go to challengers, he doesn't get a great team, or just is in a cycle of new teammates every fucking weekend, which is basically the what challengers is for the most part. I mean, the roster changes are frequent. And if he has just bad placings throughout cups, or even goes to an event, bad placing, when he could just stay on, grind eights every night, fry the pros, he'll get picked up in the offseason regardless.
Yeah, some people might look at him different if that's the case. Sure. Like, I mean, I could see it.
Well,
like I said, just from
I think no matter what,
waste.
he should stream regardless. I think that's the bottom line. His stream should be on every day for the next 7 months until the off season.
Yeah. Now, in terms of Pred, we can kind of dive into how Seattle looked in these matches. I think they went 0-2, correct?
Yeah.
This weekend. Do you think that you guys can kind of dive into what you think they felt short with? But do you also think that when you have a player that very obviously wants to move to another team and then it's unsuccessful, like, how does that affect the team dynamic of the team that you're currently on? Do you think it changes anything, or do you think that there is some sort of dynamic change?
I mean, I think it depends on the player and it depends on the environment. I'm not going to say that it's as black and white as like, oh, if somebody wants to leave my team and they're still on the team, like, oh yeah, dude, fuck that guy. Because at the end of the day, it is OpTic. I think a lot of people would take that opportunity if they got the offer, right? It's like the end game destination for a lot of players. But at the same time, like, I'm not buying that. Like, it's still like, wow, you want to leave us? Like, we just got second. Like, we're having some pretty success. We had a good champs. I think they get third at the Vanguard champs. Like, these guys have some firepower. They got some potential that they were obviously happy to build upon until this offer, came through, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, I personally, for me, I would obviously hold a little bit of animosity towards my teammates. But I mean, I can't speak for everybody else. As for their matches and why they looked bad, I mean, that could be one of the reasons. But at the same time, I think Pred was in Australia and he was they didn't scrim during the entire break. a lot of teams didn't really scrim too much, but the new spawns came and changed the way the maps were played, and these guys probably are not as practiced as some of the other teams that might have started scrimming and stuff like that a bit early. But yeah, I don't know. They just didn't look good. Pred still looked fine. Pred was still fine. He was popping off, but the rest of the roster just was not performing. And I know Pat has some things to say about Seattle and their consistency.
I just think Seattle's just up and down. Like if this OpTic thing didn't happen over the last month or whatever, like I think if they came out and went 0-2, I still wouldn't be shocked. Like this team is literally just purely highs and lows, and it's just nonstop. They've never been a consistent roster. Even in Vanguard, it was like top 3, 12th. First, 12th, like they're just all over the place. Their
drop offs are so weird, bro. I think that's why it's the search, bro.
Yeah, they're horrible at S&D. So when they play a series, they can't win a hard point. It's just like they're guaranteed to lose, pretty much. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much animosity on the team. I don't think they're really having any internal issues with Pred getting this offer. I'm sure all of them wish they got the offer, to be honest. But yeah, I think for me, I think they're just going to have another up and down season. They might have a weak Major 2. They'll come back to be strong Major 3. And yeah, I mean, the real question is what's going to happen to the Seattle roster at the end of the year for me. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't know what it could look completely different. They could lose 2 guys. Like
I don't know the contract terms. I know we've all said it extensively on the flank that Pred is basically a free agent. I don't know about Sib.
That's what I heard. Him and
Ben's always been the person that knows this stuff. But if Sib and Pred are both free agents next year, bro, they're both going to OpTic. Scump's going to be gone. That's going to make a complete a new opening. We already know that iLLeY was potentially going to get dropped next season or last season at the end of it during the offseason. Sorry. But dude, Sib, Pred, Shotzzy, even if they keep iLLeY or they keep Huke, like, bro, that 3 in terms of like their slaying power and how talented that roster is fucking nuts, dude. Sib or Pred and Shotzzy as a sub duo, they both play really fast. Pred's a fucking superstar right now. Shotzzy, we already know that kid's potential. And then Sib, as inconsistent as he is, that guy's probably still one of, if not like arguably the best flex in the league when he's performing, you know, at the level that he can. So,
Chris,
I mean, I think they both end up on OpTic next year, bro. I'm calling it now.
Seattle need to pack a punch. They need to pack a punch this season. Right now they have Sib and they have Pred. Those guys are on their roster. They can attract top talent right now.
Right now.
In the off season, if Sib and Pred are gone, who wants to go to Seattle to play with Lamar and Mac? Like you're just not going to be attracting top talent. These guys got to pack a punch ASAP. And to me, it's kind of like it's a win now season, right? Like you pack a punch, you make the best possible, you spend a little money, whatever, because come next year, you might be in a whole lot of trouble if your 2 stars leave the team.
No, I completely agree, bro. They needed to do one of 2 things. They needed to sell Pred and collect the bag, or they needed to basically keep this guy on the roster like they do now and use them right now to create an attractive environment and get some other faces on the team. So when these 2 are gone, which I think they will, or hear me out here. There could be a way where these 2
like a dynasty team. You never know.
They stay. Maybe they want to stay.
Bro, that's what I was saying. Like, dude, if you pack a punch and you make a great team, like they're like you do get a little bit of more loyalty there. Like, let's say Seattle makes a dominant roster and they win 2 events this year, maybe 1 event in champs. I think it's going to be a little harder of a combo for Pred and Sib at the end of the offseason. Like, do we leave this? Like, if we're winning, like if we're dominant, like if they have an end of the year like Thieves had last year, I don't see them leaving.
Yeah, but right now
they have the roster they want.
Right now with their current team, they're just way too up and down. And I'm not saying Pred and Sib obviously still sometimes have their inconsistent series, right, where they don't play as well, and Lamar and Mac play fine, but they're the clear glaring issues in terms of their slaying power and consistency. They're 2 of the reasons why, at least statistically, they aren't like winning their series in dominant fashions, even when Sib and Pred are playing really well. I think as much as Lamar is a good player, at times he's bringing down the roster in terms of their talent. He does bring a lot to the team, but dude, we've been talking about it. There's not enough coaches in the league, and as much as Lamar might not want to hear this, I think he'd make a great coach. I think he'd be great, man. He brings a good system to this team. He's able to mold these rookies. He's able to mold teams into being a competitive team. But at the end of the day, like he's not performing, at least statistically, up to the standard of some of these other, top teams. Like for example, FaZe, right? Or for another example, we got Toronto Ultra. Like Toronto Ultra pack a punch. All these teams, they're packing a punch. But Seattle just staying with the same system, and they did get second at the last event. But dude,
but they can get 12th next.
They
event.
can get 12th next event if they come out next major, and they have another top 4 performance. I'm not saying it's not. I mean, obviously it's not a win. It's still kind of disappointing. But if they have another top 4 performance, then I might shut up a little bit. I'm not on the same fence as you are, Pat. You think this roster was chalked a long time ago, and they needed changes and stuff like that. I said I still got hope for the team. They obviously came out. They got second. They got what, top 3, top 4 at champs. I forget their exact placement. So obviously this team is a great team. It's more so like, bro, Pred cannot be getting top 12, top 8, bro. That guy is way too fucking good. Yeah. That guy's MVP. Yeah. Like, how the fuck is he? How is he can ever place 8th? Like, it blows my mind.
So theoretically, if they do pack a punch, if there's a scenario where they pack a punch and maybe Lamar goes to coach, are you guys inferring they pick up like 2 more players to play with Sib and Pred?
Even if they get one,
like, even one, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not even saying Lamar should be the one to go.
Who would you say plays well with those two? It would be a good fit.
Dashy on that team would be pretty gross.
Dashy from a talent perspective could, bring a lot to that team, because Dashy, he's gonna play main. He'd play main AR. Sib would still stay on flex. It'd bring a lot more talent to the team, because I do think Dashy is probably a more talented player than Lamar, even Mac. But who knows? Like I said, I think
what roster I want to see on that team.
Go ahead.
Asum, Dashy, Sib, and Pred.
That would be a good team.
That would be a gross team.
It feels like it almost feels villainous, like that roster, because I feel like with Pred and Sib's personalities, I don't know how many people watch the interviews and stuff, but I got the pleasure to interview both of them at some of the majors last year for Deserto. And they have that like cocky personality,
the swagger.
It's so built
Sib especially.
in. And so if you have both of them, and then you have Dashy, who's on this little revenge tour after getting dropped, I mean, it sounds good on paper.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the reason this roster stuck together in the first place was because they all bought into this the system that Lamar did. And like I said, I'm giving him credit, bro. I think the guy's an incredible leader. I think he has that. He has that thing in him, kind of like how I've had that thing. People like Krim, Austin, all these people have that leadership quality where they can mold teams and mold players to be as efficient as possible. But when it comes from the performance aspect, like, he can't keep throwing up these 0.6s, 0.8s, like, especially against the top teams, and when you have people that are literally going out and frying in front of you. Like, I feel like it should be pretty easy to put up decent statistics, but stats aren't everything.
The only problem though is Seattle probably burnt that bridge with OpTic, because from what I've heard at least, for how the buyouts were going with the Pred convo is Seattle may have been acting in bad faith, which now is obviously, like, if they go and try and get Dashy off of the
they're gonna do OpTic to do the same thing.
Yeah. So I think they might have they should have just said no, we're not interested right away, or something. But yeah, so that might be troublesome if that's the route they want to go down this year.
Well, before we move on to past the Surge and OpTic stuff, if you guys are watching and you're not subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I talked to both of these guys before the show, and they said they'd be doing a 1v1 Wii bowling tournament if we do get 1,000 subs on this episode. So we're gonna move on from OpTic. Wii bowling, 1,000 subs. Let's shoot for it. And let's move on.
Chris, I want to smoke you in Wii bowling.
Wii bowling, yeah, but what about Wii? Yeah, but Wii boxing, you'd be fucked, bro. I got hands.
What about the VR or AR? What's it? Is it VR or AR?
Definitely VR.
Oh, VR. Okay, VR boxing.
VR boxing.
Jesus Christ,
I would love it. I kind of want to dive into LAG a little bit. They kind of closed out that this is kind of the first time we've seen close to like an overhaul of a roster with a full challengers team moving into a pro league team. And yeah, I know you guys have mentioned it a bunch, so I kind of want to dive into that and give your thoughts. Do you think I saw some comments from our last episode. People were like talking about a 16 team league, and there's so much talent in the challengers. Obviously there's a lot that goes in with that, but just on LAG specifically, What are your guys' thoughts on how they look? Obviously, they came off hot with that Challengers win, and now doing pretty good online.
I think they were so bad with that other roster that no matter what they did, it was an improvement. Yeah, it was fortunate that they had one of, if not the best challenger team who just won the event. But yeah, that first roster they put together was pitiful. And so I think them overhauling was the right move, was the right call to do. Probably should have done it in the offseason before the season started. Might have saved a little bit of cash, but yeah, I mean, these new guys came in, they're all hungry. Joe Deceives on a rookie year. Adam and Exceed, or Assault and Exceed, both kind of are in that like fight to get back type of mentality, because they've been there before, but maybe not stayed as long as they would have liked. And yeah, I think this team is super talented. I think Alec has a good personality to be surrounded with these guys, and I think they will find success. So far, they're like 4-0 in hardpoint, which is always impressive for a challenger team to come out and be like a respawn dominant team, right? Like, Chris, in the past we've seen challenger teams when they do play pro teams, it's usually the S&D where they have the leg up on the pro teams. But to come out and be like a hardpoint dominant team, and not lose one yet is very typical. So I think that their debut has been impressive. I know they had a Game 5 loss against Florida, but if they can kind of mold out their S&D and get a little better in those 2-3-5 modes, I think they'll be a team that at least can be middle of the pack at worst, right? Like I don't know if this team's going to contend for championships, but I don't think they're going to be the bottom of the barrel.
I don't see this team being a bottom of the barrel. Nope.
Yeah, which is what we've been used to with
I know
LAG,
these players.
right?
Yeah.
The last few years, that's just the expectation. And so I think they're going to at least get past that level and be in like the top 6, top 8 like range every event. So that'll be good to see.
As for me, a thumbs up to LAG. I'm actually glad they did this because I was a big proponent of the whole like, oh, if you can't get a good roster in the off season, just pick up a challenger team that has a lot of good players. It's the fucking Boston Breach project. And although Boston, when they first made their debut in Vanguard, didn't pick up a full challenger team or anything, they picked up these players and decided to try to build something, and they created a desirable environment for superstar players to come and join their team in the next offseason. For example, they got Awakening. Awakening was on Florida. Awakening saw the success. I wouldn't say success, but they looked like a decently competitive team last year, and they're like, okay, my team sucks. Let's make a move. Let's go join Boston. So LAG is doing the same thing now, right? They get this challenger team. They get a star in Joe Deceives, right? It might be a little too early to call him a star, but the guy looks very good. They get Exceed, who was tearing it up in challengers. He just won the last challenger championship and won the first event this year. They have Arcides, who the fuck doesn't know Arcides, right? The guy comes from FaZe. The guy's obviously a very accoladed player. He has the most earnings in the Call of Duty scene. The guy's obviously one of the best players that you can possibly have. And then you get Assault, who's obviously another storied world champion that obviously is trying to get back in the league and stuff like that. So at worst, if these guys aren't, let's say, the best team, if these guys at least make improvements on their other team, which they already did based on how they're playing, these guys can create a desirable place for free agents to land next year if they're not happy with their current team, right? So kudos to them. I'm very happy with the fact that they did it. I'm also happy I get to see my friends and Exceed and Assault and all these guys find some success and finally play in the league. But also, man, like, these guys are a really good team, man. Their hard point is this good because of the chemistry that these guys have. They were really good in challengers. They've been showing out in the pro league, even at the pro am where they played against FaZe. They took them to map 5, which, funny enough, they got Neslo'd by a team like FaZe, which is absurd. But honestly, man, I can't talk enough about the LAG Academy now pro team roster. I'm just glad they did it finally, because I've been literally talking about, yo, pick up some fucking challenger teams. Some of these people are better than, for example, people that weren't wanted, right? Spart, Huke, and Neptune were a trio that nobody wanted to fucking play with, and they decided to keep them.
The players, no one even wanted the players last year in the offseason. That's why they trioed up.
Yeah, they didn't. So LAG, outside of the organization being owned by a billionaire, like, they didn't really have anything that attracted people to that location, right? They didn't have any assets. Now,
yeah. I mean,
they have assets now.
Let's be real. Being in LA is also expensive. Like, you might get paid, but hey, California is going to take their piece. But But yeah, also something I like is there another team that'll talk a little bit of shit, which I mean I think we're lacking in general in the CDL. And I think these players at least will. I mean, you saw today when Exceed beat Draza, like you got a little animated.
Personality.
So
Oh yeah.
yeah. It's always good to have a little bit more personality in the league.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
sure.
I also think that from my opinion, it seems like it's good for everybody. Like it's a win-win in every scenario where a team is struggling, they pick up almost the full three out of four of a challenger's roster, and then they're seeing success with it. And it almost, to me, like from a fan's perspective, it puts more value in challengers. It's like, okay, if you're a challengers player, this is actually possible, and it brings the challenger like rep up almost to where like, if we do really good as a challenger team and all these teams are shitting the bed, or these bottom three teams are shitting the bed, there's a lot higher chance that people see the success move over.
Yeah, I think well, challengers as an ecosystem is just very important to Call of Duty because players are going to get older. Eventually, players are going to retire, and in order to keep the fans interested, we got to bring some good talent, but also personalities into this into the pro league. And I think challengers is undervalued. I sometimes we'll be talking about challengers on like the flank, and the chat is just like roasting, like, stop talking about challengers, challengers this, challengers that. And I don't understand. Like, I hate where there was like a point, and I think the narrative is changing, where people were almost making it like devaluing the fact that people were in challengers. Like people were looking down upon players that were in challengers. Like, bro, I'm gonna keep it a buck. The challengers is no joke. Not only are there really good players down there, some of them pro MVP caliber players. For example, Gunless plays in challengers. That guy was damn near considered the best player in Call of Duty for like 2 years, World War II, and what, like, you had the argument for like IW. Like, yeah, the guy was absolutely absurd. That guy's playing in challengers, and people look down upon it like it's literally a pup league. Like, it's the little pups. Like, no, man. People are not only playing ridiculous amounts of hours in challengers. You'll see a lot of the pros talk about how, oh, challengers play way more COD than pros and get way more tournament reps. And yeah, you got to think these players play the game just as much, if not more than you. You're going to find players down there that are damn good, if not better than you. And I think people need to stop looking down upon the challenger scene. Not because I play it. Listen, I don't care. But I'm saying for the other people, I want to see these people succeed. Some of these people are my good friends, like example, Exceed and stuff like that. I'm glad he's getting his flowers because that guy was really fucking good for a long time, but he was always on that like substitute bench on like these bad teams and got put in the league on scuffed rosters to try to like save them almost. Like, now he's actually getting an opportunity with people he wants to play with, and let's see what they can do. So just, I'm beyond ecstatic for those guys, and I'm happy that challengers might actually get a little bit more credit based on their success.
Yeah, the problem for me is just that the product, the challenger product from the CDL standpoint, just needs a massive major overhaul. I think that's where the discredit comes from, right? Is because it's like talent wise, like Chris, everything you're saying is right. It's obviously there are extremely talented players down there, but they just don't get the chance to showcase it. And I think Raleigh was a good example, like a good first step. But honestly, in my opinion, I think that should be the format for every single event. I don't see a reason where that should not be the format. If challenger players can come out of that qualifier online, go to the tournament and smoke pro teams, they deserve that recognition on land. Like that I think is like the funnel to get the challenger players into the pro league.
100%.
I don't think it should take one team having an academy roster that wins the event but also has a pro team who is just absolutely horrendous.
You want to what the reason why they don't have that sort of format all the time is because these CDL franchises and stuff like that, they want guaranteed screen time. So whenever the format goes back to normal, which we'll see in Boston, every single match is on the mainstream. So every single team and franchise sponsors, they get their airtime. And I know you're going to say like, bro, they should earn it.
There's solutions to that though. No, there's solutions to that though. I mean, like we saw it a couple of the days. There was the quad stream. Like there's
but that's not the same
around that
as the mainstream.
I mean, there's still solutions. I think like I just think the problem is not being eliminated on Thursday. I think that was the main issue. Like Boston Breach literally played their 2 games on Thursday and were out the tournament. Like that's an issue. That shouldn't be possible. But
I think they should have made it.
Should be in the same format.
I think they should have made groups, and if you qualified for I think they should have made it so people don't get eliminated. They just go in a loser bracket.
That could have
probably been that could have been like easier solution, which allowed people to get more game time, and then just have the bracket play out on the mainstream for the next
I
consecutive
mean,
days.
I could have like a day of a convo of how I disagree with the format that the CDL's used for the last
Yeah.
4 years. I think it could be night and day difference that still solves all the issues with like appeasing all the franchises. So
Yeah, but
that's a
I definitely
different convo for
agree,
another
man.
day.
I definitely agree that I wish they had a pro-am format at least multiple times a year, not just this one a year. I'm glad they did at the beginning of the year though, because it put teams in a lot more of a fair playing field. Because as the year goes on and pro teams get a lot more reps, like the pro teams are just more efficient, right? They get more efficient practice. They have facilities. Some of these challenger players are working part-time jobs, like they don't have the time and they don't have
Wait,
the
actually,
resources.
I want to bring that up. I want to bring that up. This because this saw me and this actually like bugged the hell out of me when I saw my timeline. Why are the challenger players still scrimming on the pro player schedule?
Because they want to play pro teams.
Bro, I don't care. Like
Stupid.
The 11 a.m. West Coast time or whatever it is, 10 a.m. West Coast time start time is the dumbest thing. The pros are able to have that schedule because it is their full-time job. You aren't getting paid to play in challengers. I don't Chris, there may be like one team that's getting salary to play in challengers,
Yeah.
but like for the most part, you're not getting paid. And so it's like, why would you play on a schedule that is made for full-time players?
Yeah.
Like
It's
it
stupid.
should literally be the old school schedule where it was like 5 to like 10, so 5 to 11, whatever that time was.
Yeah.
So people could work part-time in the day and then play at night.
Right.
That helps challengers.
Don't get me
be more
wrong.
feasible.
There are things that people can do. For example, like DoorDash and Uber Eats, like those don't have like specific hours that you need to work. But like, bro, it alienates so much. Like some people can't go to school, right?
Yeah,
Some people
there's a
can't
ton of
work normal
things.
jobs. Like you're only limited to certain things. Like for example, DoorDash, Uber Eats, Uber, because you can kind of pick your own hours. But dude, take this from me. If it wasn't for streaming and the fact that I have a platform to speak, shout reverse sweep, shout the flank, like bro, with the amount of time I invested in COD and the failure that my pro career kind of ended up being after, years and years, like there was a point where I basically invested so much into COD, I had no other options. If it wasn't for the flank, if it wasn't for the reverse sweep, if it wasn't for my streaming and stuff like that, I wouldn't be able to even play in challengers because I'd be making no money.
But that's
And
why
my
most
stream
people
content would be
retire, though.
shit. Exactly. Most
that's why
people
most
in
people retire.
challengers drop
Yeah.
out because they have no options. They have nothing else
It's
to do.
not
They
like
have
you
to
reach
commit.
an age where your talent goes away. It's you reach an age where you can no longer sustain to live by playing COD all day. And if you're in
Exactly.
like the challenger ecosystem where there is not that avenue to make a good amount of money, or at least a livable wage of money, like you have to quit. And so I think challenger players, if you do
Bro.
watch this, if there's on Reddit, change your fucking schedule.
Bro, I don't want to be
hurting
that guy.
yourself by playing on that time frame.
Listen, this is for any challenger players that watch this. I know all of you. I'm playing against you guys every day. I know some of you motherfuckers don't have jobs. I know some of you guys still live with your parents, and I did at a point too, but I'm making money and I was still living with my family. I know some of you guys don't have that luxury, and not all of you guys are going to get in the pro league. I'm going to be real. Unless there's expansion, there's going to be a point where not many of you get it in. You guys are putting all your eggs in one basket. If you guys fail, you guys are going to be so behind in life in terms of not only financial, but you're like also not going to school.
Yeah.
Some of you guys didn't go to school. Like, bro, challengers, change the fucking schedule of your practice hours. Tournament schedules, I get it. People can make time or try to make time. There's nothing really we can do about that. But in terms of the practice schedule, make it so people at least have an option. If you still don't want to work or go to school or do something like that and be a bum and continue to pursue the pro dream, sure, do it. But at least don't say you had an option, because I know there's a lot of challengers in recent years that have quit, that were good, but they couldn't sustain themselves anymore. Do yourself a fucking favor.
Now, from one end to the other, Chris was spitting there. I think that needs to be addressed. But from one end of to the other, I kind of have like I'm curious what you guys think. But what would you say is the best team in the game right now?
Toronto Ultra and Atlanta FaZe. I think they're A and B right now. I think they're both on the top of their game. If FaZe play like they played this weekend, where they came out and 3-0'd Seattle in 25 minutes, then they're clear-cut the best team. But I don't know if we're going to see that FaZe in every series. But I think in terms of a well-rounded team, I think Toronto is the best. I think they're good at all three game modes. They aren't a team that's susceptible to getting like Neslo'd by like a Florida. I think they're just so like put together across the board that I think they're the most consistent, well-rounded team. But again, if we get the phase that just come out and no one can kill them, then they're by far and away the best.
And I've had this argument with you guys on the flank many times. The best team in the game is the team that won the last tournament, but sometimes I get it. That could be Fugaze, for example,
they were the best
LAG
team
win
up until Monday
but
morning.
I'ma say New York. Reason being is they went to that event, they dominated. They came home, they played their league matches, they still look just as good. Hydra's still on form. Yeah. Skies had a rough couple maps and they were still looking really good.
Fair,
and then turned up.
They should have lost their series. Like they clutched up. They
did clutch up. But still, with Skies playing so poorly and them still being so competitive and still winning out the series, I'm not completely sold that New York is going to fall off anytime soon. I think these guys have the teamwork. They're good at every mode. These guys are gritty, bro. You know what's funny? They also don't play the slower maps, bro. They play the maps with pace. They're always playing the fortresses. They're always playing.
They're my third best team, to be fair. They're my third.
I think New York is the best team right now until the next event. We'll see how they place. But dude, New York just looks so polished. They play so aggressive, which I'm a fan of. They just look like they got this game right now dialed in, and it doesn't look like they're going to slow down much. So, I mean, they're definitely my best team in the game. Close second, probably FaZe. I think FaZe is obviously always going to be a contender for that. They got a star-studded lineup, and with how Abizi's been playing lately, Abizi's looking a lot better than he did in Vanguard in terms of consistency factor.
What's your third then, Chris?
Ultra.
So we have the same top three, just different order.
Yeah.
So
to expand on that a little bit, like, do you think you guys have mentioned like some of the teams being unprepared for both the first LAN tournament as well as like some of these qualifiers due to Pred being out of country, just certain variables. Do you think that the reason that these three teams are the top three teams is like they have had more reps and better practice than the remaining teams? And I guess where I'm going with this is like it's so strange to me from an outsider's perspective to like see how regularly you guys talk about teams being unprepared for like qualifier weeks and tournaments. Like, because you think like the NFL football season or whatever sport, like the teams show up day one and they're prepared, and that's like the big. So it's like, how does the readiness happen? Like, how does
the game changes, right? Like there was a spawn update, and I think that changed the pace at which some of these maps are played, which I also think suits the top three teams that we were just talking about. I think they all got better from that update, and so when the game is able to change, also, I mean, I know this happened early, right? But when the M4 got GA, that kind of also shifted. So that was really much earlier on the season. But like, I think the fact that the game evolves, things change, a hot fix, a patch will kind of update some of the way the game is played. That can kind of, go up and down for a few of these teams on the ladder. But also, I mean, teams that just are constantly improving, teams that are constantly working and working on the right things, right? Like, Chris, we were talking about like if Ray is if their VOD review is strictly the mini map and spawns versus like watching other things that they can pick up on, like I think preparation, like how teams prepare, like matters a ton.
Yeah, but also the spawn update came at the major. The major teams didn't have to play on it. The challenger teams did, and then right after that, it was a Christmas break and New Year's break. So a lot of these teams didn't really have time to play. Some people came home from visiting their families and stuff like that, or celebrating their little vacations a little bit earlier and got a little head start. But on top of that, now that I think about it, those top three teams are probably the most well put together outside of like Thieves. Every other team is having like roster turmoil where they're just not the most talented roster, or like Seattle, for example, in terms of their inconsistencies. So like they've been like the most stable teams where like they got those rosters they wanted. They went into the season, they've been playing together this whole time and just improving together, right? Where some of these other teams haven't had that luxury. So it's almost like these guys are just ahead, but they're staying ahead because of they don't care about the other teams. They're just focusing on themselves. They're playing with who they want to play, and they're dialing it in, bro. They're just grinding together, grinding as much as they can. And they're not worried about anything else. So they've definitely got the most put together rosters. on the topic of Thieves, because we actually
Yeah.
I just brought them up. LA Thieves have been struggling, and they are the former world champions. And I don't know about you, Pat, but like last season, it was almost the same thing, right? Where they started off the season slow as hell. They had a role swap, and then they started to get better and better.
The problem is Kenny's their best player right now, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I was about to say they're not going to roll swap this year. They got the formula they want. I think the game, they're just not as good at this game, and
This is what I hate about COD. This is genuinely what I hate about COD.
They're not as good at this game.
The game is just different, straight up. Like, I don't think it plays to their strengths that Vanguard did. It's not that these guys are less talented. It's not that anything in their formula has changed. It's just that the game is fundamentally different than Vanguard was. And yeah, I mean, like, they're definitely not roll. There is nothing to roll switch. Kenny's on the same role, and he's frying. He's playing great. But yeah, I don't think they are as good fit for this game as they were in Vanguard. And you know what? Maybe they can get better, right? That's always possible. But I mean, like, I think it is just an underlying issue that, like, this team is just not as good on Modern Warfare 2 as they are on Vanguard.
I think I give it another major before I'm like, what can they do?
That's the hardest thing.
It's crazy. It's crazy that you can actually ask that. Like post winning champs this early in the season, it's like, well, do they make a roster
it happens
change?
to every team.
Like, at what point do they do that?
I mean, I think this is just generally the problem with COD switching every year. Like, I think this is going to be the first year it doesn't happen, and it's like, you know, you can come off a world championship win and be like, all right, I'm probably going to be the best team again when the season starts. But like, we have never had that. Like, it's so hard when the games switch.
Bro, you want to know what's funny? It's the same conversation that we had last year. Because even if, like, let's say they still keep underperforming, and I'm not saying underperforming where they're shit. I'm talking about underperforming for their standards, right? These guys have the talent to be a top 4 team. If they're not placing that well consistently, what do they do? What can they do? Last year was the same question. We were like, what can they do? They can't even get they can't even get a new person on their roster. Who are they going to upgrade? Who do they pick up? Who do they drop? Who do they upgrade? So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a pointless conversation, but just to touch on it, like, what the fuck is going on with our world champions? These guys are not playing up to their standards. Are these guys just slow to learn? What is it with these guys?
Maybe.
Because they're still a decent team,
Probably, yeah.
I mean, they really.
Bro, I expect these guys to
figured it out. I mean, and there's always a chance that they just figure it out again.
I think they will get better. No doubt they'll get better. But I do think it's worth mentioning that they're just not as suited for this game as they were in Vanguard.
Yeah, I think it's more so one of those things that's like, for me and Pat, because we are critics. We got our eyes on you, Thieves.
Yeah,
you're not safe just because you won champs.
You don't got to blow it up just yet, but around the corner.
But the clock's ticking.
The clock is ticking,
the wires
bro.
are crossed.
I need some results.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'm going to start saying pred to Thieves. Like, no, I'm kidding. But
I kind of want to touch on something that you said there, though, Pat, is like, this is a 2-year game for the first time. How do you think the rosters are going to look like? Like, do you see a world where by the end of year 1, there's like a lot of set teams and like less roster changes come year 2? Like, do you think the top 3 to 5 teams are like really set because it's the same game and they don't really see much changes? Or do you see like the bottom teams just literally just shuffling around dice at the start of next year?
I actually have a good answer for this.
Okay,
and this is my diabolical plan, and where challengers finally get their credit. Because the problem with challenger people or players in general and making roster moves with challenger players is you never know if they're going to be good at the next game. But this year, if they have a good year in challengers, players that have good years in challengers, maybe some of the people that win the first challenger championship of the first year, they might look appealing to some of these lesser bottom teams. While on the top end, right, we will know all the good players of Modern Warfare at the end of the year. And so these higher echelon teams, if they are not happy with their teams, they can shuffle with these top talents that people actually know. It's not the same as next year, or it's not the same as every prior year, because every prior year is like, yeah, Pred's disgusting, but is Pred going to be good at the next game? I'm just throwing a name out there. But you get the point. There's going to be a lot more known quantities. That's actually something that Ben used to like to say, but there's going to be a lot more known quantities in the off season for next year, which is going to allow for top teams to formulate or potentially try to formulate God squads, because they're going to know all the good players. or two, it's gonna create a little bit more space on the bottom end, because let's say some of these lower tier teams can't get these really good players, but obviously these other players aren't very good. Hey, maybe they actually dip into challengers and take it a lot more serious, because it's a 2-year game, and these challenger players aren't going to like just fall off because it's the same game that they've been playing for an entire year.
What I see happening is, because there will be known quantities, I think the upper echelon teams are going to make those God squads. I think you can like definitively make roster changes that aren't gambles, right? Like in the prior games, like you kind of make gambles in the offseason if you try to improve a top team, because you don't know if you're going to get the same performance out of some guy that you got last year, or if he was good on another team. But like now you can pretty much confidently say like game is not going to change that much from year 1 to year 2. Maybe there'll be some updates or whatever, but it'll be pretty much the exact same game. So I think these top echelon teams who can afford to make solid rosters I think the league's going to be very top heavy.
We're already talking about it, Pat.
Especially with Seth retiring. I think OpTic's going to be putting down a ton of money to get a God squad, and I think that's going to force other teams to do the same thing. And we know there's 4, maybe 5 teams in the CDL that can afford to do that, and I think they will do that. And I think, and then on the bottom side, I think the bottom teams are going to have to dip into challengers, honestly.
Yeah. I wish I had Ben here with me, so Ben could literally give us a lowdown of every player whose contract is basically going to end.
Maybe we could bring Ben on as a guest. Put it down in the comments
guest.
below.
Put it down in the comments.
We are searching for special guests, so if you want one, let us know.
But no, seriously, man, like we already talked about one who we expect to form in the offseason, Pred, Sib, Shotzzy, whatever the hell happens there. Like that's already a God squad on paper. You got to think some of these other teams will be looking to make bids for some of these players if they're not happy with their current rosters. Hell, we're talking about Thieves, potentially struggling if they continue to struggle the next couple of months. Who knows what that roster is going to want to do in the offseason or even later in the season. So, I mean, at the end of the day, sky's the limit. I'm actually glad we're finally getting a 2-year cycle, because I'm excited for that, man. The Rostermania is going to be a lot more fun, because people are going to actually know, how, high the ceiling of some of these players are. And even like I said, for challengers, it's definitely going to be an exciting time for them, because people are less likely to kind of see some of these players as gambles.
It is going to be weird though if like this is a 2-year cycle and then we go back to 1-year cycles. Like I really want to see what like the future of Call of Duty releases look like. If it's like 2-2-2-2-2.
Oh my God, Pat, 2 years of Treyarch.
I think it has to be. I think it has to.
2 years.
Know. They still have 3 studios, right? Like Sledgehammer is still involved, so we know the next one's going to be Treyarch. But like,
so if we get a 2-year
Treyarch,
Treyarch,
have another one right after. So we'll see.
Yeah. So before we get on to the pick'ems, one kind of final fun question that kind of stemmed off a tweet that went out yesterday, I think from DeCerto's Twitter, that raised a lot of like fun answers and questions. It was a picture of, I think, Killa, Big T, Nade,
and Zuma
and Tommy. But we'll open it up outside of just those 4 and just say in general, if you guys could pick one retired pro, Pat, you can't pick yourself, that would come back full force, what team would they end up on, and who would it be? Like, where do you see someone coming back? They're in their peak performance, and what team would they gel perfectly with? So you could rip anyone off a roster.
But like peak performance in modern game, like even though the games are different.
Assuming they were playing at their best level.
Yeah, like
on the new game, any
game. Big timer picks up MW2 and he's just going insane.
Mine would be Mir. I think if Mir could come back and play at the level he played the BO2 for like the first 4 months, I think he would be disgusting, because how good he was in the first 4 months in a sub player role, the pressure he put on the map, I think would if we could get like that specific 4-month period, I think he would be gross.
Great personality too.
I'm gonna stand up for this one, because I got the best one.
Uh-oh.
People in the comments,
top 4 person.
They're not even ready for this. No, I'm not. Listen, IW Formal on FaZe. Bang, bro.
In replacement for Slasher?
Obviously for Slasher. I'm not saying Slasher's bad, but I'm saying like on that team. Bro, listen, if any of you guys in comments are new to competitive Call of Duty, if you guys have never seen Infinite Warfare Formal, go watch his event at Champs and just watch the maps he played. That guy was absurd in Infinite Warfare. And obviously, if he's playing on a team like FaZe, like, bro, that's a god squad. IW Formal, it's not even close.
You could throw yourself, or you could throw Karma.
Hey,
You could throw so many players on the FaZe squad.
Wait,
and
I'm
they
just
would probably
saying.
be dominant.
I'm just saying, IW Formal.
If you got any legend picks from previous COD and threw them on that FaZe squad, they're gonna fucking.
Hey, bro, listen, IW Formal was godlike.
Where are you putting Miracles though?
Yeah, what team are you putting him on? For who?
I would put him on Seattle.
For Mac.
I would put him on, bro. Dashy, BO2 Mirror, Sib and Pred. That team would be gross.
Yep.
I'd coach that team. No bullshit. I'd coach that team.
Oh, that'd be so good.
All right.
But yeah, let's go into pick'ems. So I key selected 3 matches from next weekend. Obviously, we don't record every single day after the matches. So I kind of went through the whole weekend. So first up, we have Toronto versus OpTic. Thoughts, gentlemen?
Toronto.
What? Toronto's swiping the floor with these guys. I don't care. I don't care if OpTic's making improvements.
Okay.
I
Toronto's
think
gross.
this will probably be like a 3-1. I think OpTic will probably snag a map.
Control.
Maybe. But Toronto's just too good, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Toronto's just a better team.
OpTic was able just to out talent Boston today, but I don't think that's gonna happen against Toronto.
I think we held all the OpTic viewers until right now, which is good. We made it pretty far into this.
OpTic's test is gonna come when they play, like, right? They get their first test
Toronto,
here with Seattle.
Phases,
They're gonna get their Torontos, their New Yorks, bro.
New York, yeah.
When OpTic play New York, I don't know when they're gonna play it. Assuming they play soon. If New York is playing at the level that those guys play against OpTic, they're going to make them look silly because New York's teamwork is just way too good and they have the talent to match. So we'll see. We'll see how OpTic's able to perform against these top teams.
And then my second matchup that I snagged was NYSL versus FaZe.
This is going to be a good one. This is probably going to be the best one. I think this is going to be a straight slugfest. For me, I think this is going to be like a proving match for FaZe. If that FaZe we saw this weekend wasn't like a one fluke off day. I don't know if they'll be able to play bully ball against NYSL the same way they were this weekend, but if we see this FaZe roster come and be in that like unkillable state, I think they win. But I do think you got to give NYSL credit. They're a great team. I think it's probably going to go game 5. I'm going to say FaZe clutch up and start the run for the Major 2 victory for Atlanta FaZe.
Yeah, I think this is going to go map 5 Grueler. I'm going to give this to New York still. I think New York is just going to keep riding on the momentum that they've had. But, I mean, I could see a world where FaZe take this. I think the new spawns that came out, some people might not agree with this, but I think they're very similar to old spawns, like Cold War-esque spawns, where you can kind of pinch out hills, block people, spawn them far, rather than like the whole squad spawn system. Funny enough, there are no squad spawns anymore for people watching. They're very similar to Cold War-esque spawns, and I think that's going to help these guys in Hardpoint be a lot more consistent and kind of understand the game at a better level. So I could see a world where FaZe win, but I'm still going to give the edge to New York. I'm still not sold on them, falling off, and I think they're going to continue to be a top team this year. I just watched their team. I watched their team play, and they're way too good on a teamwork level. They play so fast. Like they're such a good team right now.
Beautiful. And then our final pick'em, I have Boston versus Paris.
Legion, Vegas, not Paris.
Oh, Vegas versus Boston.
It's all good. We all make the same mistake.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pat.
This is a tough one. I think these guys are pretty even. Fuck it. I'm gonna go Vegas. Showing out. I think either team could win this, but I'm gonna go Vegas game 5.
I'm gonna go with Vegas just because Vegas have the edge in the search, and I think that's something that Boston has been struggling with. And Boston and Vegas are both serviceable hardpoint teams. And I think there's a way where Vegas basically extend this to a game 5 off the search and destroys and the hard points
and
potentially.
Boston can't win a game 5.
And they can't win a game 5, so it's going to be a Vegas victory for me.
Beautiful. Alrighty, gentlemen.
What about you, James? What about you? We gotta get your predictions.
Oh, my predictions. Let's go. Toronto versus OpTic. I am gonna go with Toronto. I think Scrappy's gonna have himself a series.
OpTic fans are gone, so you can say that.
NYSL versus FaZe. I'm gonna go FaZe, And then Boston versus Paris. I'm gonna go Boston.
Vegas.
Dude, I'm reading it off this, and I just keep seeing Paris. I'm going Boston over Paris over Las Vegas, whatever their name is. They're not winning. Anyways, gentlemen, it was a pleasure. We're back, and this is what it's going to look like for the qualifier weeks. I had a great time this evening. If you guys have not already subscribed, I don't know what you're doing. So many people come back and watch this show week by week, and we have so many people that watch that are unsubscribed. Just get the notification.
Just hit the button.
Just
It's just a button
Get the
press.
notification
Like, tap the
in your
screen.
bin. Just get it in your bin. You wake up on your Monday morning after watching the matches, and the reverse sweeps in your bin. Thank you guys. We'll be back next week, and have a great week.